here we are with a spaceship in orbit around, well, it's not really in orbit around anything. It's on an encounter with Tylo, which is one of the moons of Jewel. And after it finishes its encounter with Tylo here, it's going to escape the orbit of Tylo. And then after escaping the orbit of Tylo, it's going to be in orbit around Jewel. I think we're going this way. And then it happens to be that from this position, the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to hit Tylo again. And we can see this purple line is indicating the trajectory there. And with my current settings, we don't get to see any more patches, but it's going to keep flying around here in the Tylo system for a little while. I doubt that this particular encounter is kicking us out of, the Jewel system is going to kick us out of Jewel. So unlike the drawing on the asphalt that we just looked at, the real situation that we're dealing with is a little bit more complicated. There are two significant differences between a static two-dimensional world and what we have to deal with in Kerbal Space Program. The first one is that Kerbal Space Program environment isn't two-dimensional. For example, here in the Jewel system, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moons. We have 5 moons. And at least the two outer moons here are not coplanar with the other moons. They have orbits that are inclined. This guy here, Bop, is a pretty small moon, and it's also at a relatively high inclination. So that means that when you're just sort of randomly on zero inclination orbits flying through the Jewel system, you don't necessarily get free encounters with Bop. When you want to encounter Bop, you have to change your inclination to do it. And once you change your inclination to encounter Bop, then you're in the wrong plane for encountering pretty much everyone else. So that's one of the complications here on how we do this. Let me show that. If we want to get an encounter with Bop, we would have to go ahead and set as target. You can see that right now we have a 17-degree inclination difference to Bop, so we would have to create a maneuver node, and most easily here at the ascending node. But the other possibility is that we could find someplace else where we can do it that would also get us not coplanar, but some path that happens to hit the thing. That's tricky to do, but it might be the fastest or lowest delta V solution. So it's something that, when we're solving this problem in general, is something that we want to deal with. Now, for this upcoming assignment, I'm not actually going to require that you come up with an optimal solution, because the problem is sufficiently complicated that coming up with an optimal solution would be a lot of work, and it would require understanding all of the pieces of the problem. But if you can find ways to get significant time decreases from considering one more thing, like are there any really good burns to get to Bop that don't involve doing an inclination change to match planes at the ascending or descending node, that would be useful to figure out. So here, imagine we were in a low orbit around Jewel, and we wanted to visit all 5 moons. We have the same sort of problem that we had with the Kerbin system, where sort of the first question is, what order do we want to visit the moons in? And then that's going to raise the question of, well, there's a lot of possible orders. There's 5 moons. So we end up with how many permutations of the 5 moons are there? Several. We at least have to search through those. But then also we have the question of, can we do any more high-speed things? So let me get out of Tylo orbit here, just for the purpose of being able to show more maneuvers. Alright, now we're just in, let me get rid of my maneuver nodes. Alright, so now we're just in Jewel orbit with a Tylo encounter. And we can start to consider how to get to other moons here. And one interesting thing about the Jewel system is that we do have this set of moons, Lathe, Val, and Tylo, the 3 inner moons, that are largely coplanar. So we can start looking at, if we're optimizing for delta V, it's fun to just start playing with the question of, can we just incidentally hit a moon? And there we had one. So there it's possible to just incidentally hit Val in the same plane that we're already in. And then if we wanted to try real hard, we could try to find a way so that when we come off our encounter with Val, we just automatically hit Lathe and that sort of thing. But again, that's not necessarily what we're trying to do for this particular problem. Those are all good plans for trying to optimize the amount of delta V. And actually, in Kerbal mission planning, minimizing the amount of delta V is generally the thing that you're doing when you're playing the game. But we're not trying to solve that problem. We're instead trying to minimize the amount of time. So if we want to get to Lathe here in the minimum amount of time, well, the way to do that is to just do an immediate maneuver where we slow down enough. Where we slow down enough that we hit Lathe. Now, something that you'll notice here is that unlike the static situation that we analyzed before, Lathe is going to move. So if we just reduce our current velocity by burning retrograde, that's going to slow down our spaceship, which is then going to have to fall towards Joule here. Periapsis of 1.7. I don't think that hits atmosphere, so that's okay. If you hit the Julian atmosphere, it's super thick atmosphere, so you burn up pretty quick. Although, one of the things that you sometimes run into is you want to do you want to use the atmosphere of a planet to slow down. Again, that's a trick to save delta V. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to save time. So just trying to go directly here, the first encounter that we get requires us to go all the way around. So that leaves the question, is there a way to hit Lathe sooner? So if we add a maneuver here, and instead of trying to slow down, we just actually try to burn in the direction that we're going. And maybe speed up. And burn in the direction that we're going. There we go. So that gives us an encounter that is factually sooner. So Lathe, what is this? Yeah, Lathe is orbiting around this. You can't see my finger. Lathe is orbiting around this way. It's orbiting this way. And before we had an encounter over here, but now by making it so that we move forward faster, we're able to get an encounter earlier. To do that, we need to burn here for almost 2,000 delta V. On this particular ship, we actually have a lot of delta V. We have 9,000 delta V. So maybe we can afford to spend 2,000 delta V here, getting that burn and saving. So this is an encounter in 1 day, whereas the other encounter we were looking at, if we just slow down until we get the encounter a little further away. There we go. This encounter is in 1 day 4 hours. The other encounter was in like 1 day 1 hour. Whereas we're saving 1,000 delta V, so we have this trade-off. Do we want to save 4 hours by spending an extra 1,000 delta V? And then that's compared to other options like, what if we do 2 burns? What if we burn at our periapsis here in order to circularize our orbit? And then once we burn there, what if we add a second maneuver? This user interface is inconvenient for second maneuvers. There we go, to slow down. So it looks like that particular location isn't any better. In fact, we are not seeing any encounters because we don't have enough patches. But 2 burns is another option, and again, getting to a lower orbit faster means we'll be moving faster around the planet, which will save some time. So those are the extra approaches that I think are worth thinking about. when trying to consider what the fastest path through is going to be. And then those are the two extra complications we have compared to the static image. We have a three-dimensional space, so things are all inclined, and the planets are moving, and that's another consideration. The other thing that's important is that when you do get an encounter, the encounter is going to change your orbit. And that's something that you can take advantage of to save delta V. And you're going to have to save delta V to produce optimal time, because by saving delta V at one point, you'll have more delta V to burn later for other points. And with all of that, you have another couple trade-offs. Do you want to try to simulate the entire sequence of events in your script, or do you want to try to use the Kerbal simulation to do all the work for you by setting up like chains of maneuver nodes and permuting them? Either way, you're accomplishing the same task of searching through a space of possible maneuvers, but there are computational benefits and complexity benefits to both of those approaches. And how you're doing your search, whether you can transform this into a graph search problem like I talked about, or whether you're going to have to sort of simulate the graph search by permuting maneuver nodes that you actually create in a Kerbal Space Program, is another set of complications. So I think that is most of what I wanted to talk about. Good luck on the current assignment that you're actually working on. Good luck on this assignment, and have fun.